Debate. And today, more bad news from Peugeot Citroën. Europe's second biggest car maker announced a first half loss of 819 million euros this Wednesday. That's double what analysts had forecast, and it reflects a downturn here in Europe. Europe accounts for more than 3/4 of Peugeot sales. Well, CEO Philippe Varin says his cost-cutting plan is PSA's only chance of survival.
I can tell you today about the confidence I have in this path to return to break-even, which is linked to the new market order. This return to break-even requires painful decisions. I am very confident in the group's commitment to see these painful and difficult decisions through, and also in the support of the government to help us find concrete terms of working out the restructuring of personnel from the production sites in Aulnay and Rennes.
Well, the French government has other ideas. President François Hollande says Varin's plans to cut thousands of jobs is simply unacceptable. Instead, he wants to aid car makers via subsidies for investment in green technology. Let's take a listen to his industry minister speaking earlier today.
This is a plan which brings a new industrial strategy by progressively reinventing the French car, with the support of government authorities, with the support of local government, with the support of car makers, companies, and the French people.
Well, Peugeot's share price is down 75% over the past 12 months. Can this latest initiative from the government help turn things around? And can Europeans still make cars? Some of the questions I'll be asking tonight. Let me introduce you to the panel. Berry Van Gestel is the director of Firm en France. He's also the former chairman of Cadillac. Thanks for being with us this evening.
Good evening.
Also with us is Bill Stewart. He's from the American University in Paris. He's the director of their International Business Administration Department. Good evening to you. And I'm also joined by Pascal-Emmanuel Gaubry. He's the founder of the research institute Newsphere. Good evening to you all. Thanks for being with us. Now, before we talk to tonight's panel, let's remind ourselves a little bit of the government's plan. Arnaud Montebourg unveiled that plan earlier today. It's all about increasing in green technologies. There you go. This is to get the car industry going. There will be a consumer bonus if you buy an electric car. So you'll get 7,000 euros back instead of 4,000 euros. 25% of government cars will be electric or hybrid and presumably made here in France. And there will be increased penalties for those who choose to drive those gas-guzzling things, those big 4x4s that pump out pollution into the environment. So there you go. That's the government strategy. They say it's going to cost some 500 million euros over the next year. Money, we should say, that the government is having trouble finding at the moment. Berry Van Gestel, let me start with you. What do you think of the government's plan, first up?
Well, what they are doing, they are influencing a very small part of the market. Because you're talking about, well, the most optimistic prognosis is that 10% of the cars sold in 2020 will be electrical. The lowest is 2% in 2020. So you're talking about 1, 2, 3% of the total market. You're giving subsidy to 3 or 4% of the production size of Peugeot. Will that help them? I don't think so, because the 98 other percent they still have to produce in a very competitive market.
All right. Bill Stewart, a few years ago, Peugeot and Renault, in fact, they got 3 billion euros from the French government in aid, a bailout, a loan that they do have to pay back. Shouldn't then the government have some say in running the company, some say in strategy?
No, because the government doesn't know anything about making cars. The car industry itself has enough trouble making cars, at least making them profitably. And I mean, this plan is, as Barry said here, this plan of spending 500 million euros to wipe out an 800 million euro loss with electric cars that nobody wants. Nobody wants yet, at least. It's not very good business. It's great politics, but it's very bad business.
And Pascal-Emmanuel Gaubry, investors clearly don't like it. I mean, they want Philippe Varin to go ahead and close plants and slash jobs. Deeply unpopular, of course, with voters here in France. But is that what is the painful truth? Is that what has to be done to save this car maker?
Probably. I mean, there were analyst reports suggesting that they would have to cut jobs as early as a year ago. And they were saying, you know, has to cut jobs, has to cut plans, has to refocus the company. And they've been saying that for more than a year, and they knew that he had to postpone it until after the presidential election, of course. It was not a business decision, it was a political decision. But, not to pile on too much on Peugeot, it's also part of, they've pretty much got their hands tied because the problem is with the broader market. The problem is there's an oversupply of cars in Europe. People are making too many cars in Europe and they're not buying them anymore because the economy is bad and people don't have any money. And the reason for that is because all the car makers are subsidized. You were referring to the 3 billion euros, the scrappage scheme.
But they were bailouts for American car makers as well.
Yeah, that's the point. There's bailouts for everybody. And so everybody is making too many cars.
So what should the governments do then in the US and here in Europe? Should they just stay out of it and let these companies go down, even when you're talking about a huge percentage of the workforce? Or should they try and come up with initiatives like the one we've seen today?
Well, first of all, it may not be a bad idea to keep the companies running by company guys. But at the end is that what you need to do, you have to look at the marketplace. You need to see what the people need. People are always talking about electrical cars. If you take the same size of car in a small petrol engine, you pay 7,000 euros instead of 30, and it uses 2 to 3 liters of petrol for 100 kilometers. 2-3 liters, not more. You don't have to build a battery that you have to recycle afterwards. It's costing 7,000 instead of 30,000. So even with the 7,000 subsidy, you'll never get there.
So they're going down the wrong road, excuse the pun, with these hybrid cars, these electric cars.
Very much so.
What should they be doing then, Bill?
Well, I disagree on closing factories. I think they should, unlike my beloved American companies, I think they should learn how to be more productive and not fire people and not worry too much about how much they pay labor, but worry about how much that labor produces. I don't know the specific situation of Peugeot any more than I know the productivity problems in my own organization, of which I'm not director, by the way. But we haven't seen a real move toward productivity. I was reading a little bit after I was asked to be on the show, reminding myself of the great Saturn project of General Motors, how this great technology was going to save the planet. I remember when I was teaching in the French Business School in Lyon at the time, and I criticized them, saying these people are out of their minds. Technology is not their problem. Productivity is. There was one GM factory where they offered the workers the ability to go home when they finished their normal quota of production. No, excuse me, they had to double their quota of production. Mm-hmm. And the workers went home before lunch.
Well, this is a problem they say is quite specific to France, because if we look at Volkswagen in Germany...
Oh, Volkswagen in Germany.
One statistic
Toyota
for you,
in France.
One statistic for you. The average worker at Volkswagen generates on average 30,000 euros for the company. A worker at Peugeot generates less than 3,000 euros. Those are figures I've taken from Bloomberg. I mean, that's a pretty big gap, isn't it?
That's an enormous gap. It's so large you don't even want to believe it. Okay. I mean, let's assume it's true. Even if it's only 1/5 as bad as that, it's still horrible. And that's not the fault of the worker. The worker does his or her job and is probably pretty tired after a day of not doing much. It's the fault of the management. It's the fault of the management over the very long run.
But why aren't French executives doing the kind of deals that we saw executives in Germany doing? I mean, they guaranteed the workers that they would have a pension payout, and they guaranteed, more importantly, that they wouldn't close the plant. I mean, if Peugeot had thought of this sooner, surely this could have saved a lot of trouble right now.
They guaranteed that in exchange for more flexible arrangements and in exchange for lower pay. And so, I mean, that's a much bigger debate, which is the fact that German workers and unions over the past 10 years have accepted lower pay in exchange for jobs. German workers make the same money, on average, make the same money today than they did 10 years ago. Their purchasing power has not increased. In France, our purchasing power increased, but we have less jobs. It's either choice is defensible, but it's easy to say you should just get the German culture in France and implant it, but it's in practice it tends to be pretty hard. Just as doubling the productivity of a factory worker in a French factory is easy to say but hard to do.
But I mean, in terms of keeping the car maker alive, Volkswagen is Europe's #1 car maker. Peugeot is Europe's #2 car maker. Volkswagen is doing very well. It's set to announce over 6 billion euros worth of profits. Peugeot's just announced an 800 million euro loss. So why not learn lessons from Volkswagen?
You always have to look at your neighbor, how he's doing the business, but it's short term what we're talking about. Volkswagen, many years ago, after the Beetle, was almost bankrupt, and they got back up. What they have been doing, and with a lot of applause, you have to say that, they have been able to create an image that makes their cars being more sellable at a higher price. They also sell bigger cars. They sell a lot less of the small cars than Peugeot does. And on a small car, you can make 100 to 150 euro profit, not more. And on a big car, you can go to 3,000 euros. So and also Germany is a market for bigger cars. In France, you cannot sell a big car, as I know well from my past.
Let's remind ourselves of just how much trouble Peugeot is in, given today's figures. I think we can bring up a graphic for you now, just looking at the numbers that were announced today. Can we have a look at that? There we go. 800 million euro loss in the first half of this year. A 13% decline in world sales and a 13% decline in European sales. So those are the numbers. And as I just said, a very different story over at Volkswagen. But you were talking about the product range. I'm asking myself if the choice of executive might have something to do with it. Now, the CEO of Volkswagen, Winterkorn, has worked in the car industry all his life, I believe. He's an engineer. He knows cars. Winterkorn, he designs the cars himself. He's very into the models, etc. He's invested a lot of money in that. Philippe Varin, the executive at Peugeot, is from the steel maker, Chorus. That's the last place he worked. I mean, does it make sense to appoint these kind of guys to run car companies?
You have had two kinds in the past. You had car people running a company. For a number of years, that went well. And they said, we have to save money, so we put a bean counter, as it's called in the US, in it. Normally, then the company goes down. So you need to have different people and different episodes and in different cycles of life in a car company. It's not that Volkswagen did very well since last year. Volkswagen did very well for the last 10 years. And they had a very nice structure and strategy to increase their product offering, to increase their image, and that's the strongest point, in my view, that they have been able to do, to keep their labor cost, even in Germany, at a lower level, and, let's not forget, to produce a lot of cars outside Germany, in lower cost markets. Mm-hmm. Seat is part of Volkswagen. Skoda is part of Volkswagen. Those are two... Bentley as well.
Yeah. Audi.
Take the example of Bentley, Skoda and Seat. Seat produced in Spain, Skoda in Czechoslovakia, Bentley in England, and Volkswagen and Audi in Germany. But they have been able to create a mix. They also produce in the US. So what you do is you have to spread all your eggs over different baskets so that you can take advantage of the whole world economy, because you're not living in France only. If you are very competitive in the world market, you can also sell in France. If you are not competitive in France, you cannot sell in the world market either. So doing things only in France on a small scale will not change the fortune of a car company. And then also pushing people down into small cars where nobody can make a profit, that somebody has to give in.
Just on the point about labour costs, I think we can have a look at this as well, just to give you a visual aid of the labour market costs. There you go, in millions. Labour costs for a French car maker, a car maker here in France, 80 million. In Germany, 70 million. In Italy, 55 million. Spain, 51 million. And Slovakia, way down, as you just mentioned, 19 million. Is that part of the problem, do you think, Bill Stewart? They haven't spread their...
I don't think it's a major part of the problem.
Facilities?
I don't think it's a major part of the problem. I mean, by the way, it's 80,000. 80.
Sorry, 1,000.
That's a lot of money, 80,000. And that's the cost to the company. That's not what the worker earns. It is a lot of money, but I don't think it's the major problem. It's what you get for what you pay. And if you had the productivity 4 times higher in France than in Slovakia, you wouldn't blink at 80,000 euros for a worker. You wouldn't blink at all. but they don't have that productivity, and that's where the problem. That's the same problem we've had in the United States. Today, in the United States, the General Motors new hire is hired at $11 an hour, which is basically the same as Walmart. Gets a few more benefits at General Motors, but he's getting hired at extremely low wage, lower than Slovakia.
So what's the answer?
Get more productive. I think
Longer
that's the only
hours,
answer. Get more
less
productive,
holidays.
get more productive, get more productive. They don't have a culture of productivity. I mean the automobile industry. I don't mean Peugeot per se, although Peugeot is also there.
But I thought we were producing too many cars that don't want to be bought.
We are, but if you're more productive, you'll be the one with the lowest cost, and then you'll for a given quality, and you'll beat up on your competition, which is the whole purpose of the business world. The enemy is the competition. The enemy shouldn't be the worker. It shouldn't be the manager. It shouldn't be the salesman. It should be the competition. But I don't think that's the case.
The thing is with the difference between Peugeot and Volkswagen is, we spoke about the oversupply, and that leads to an extremely competitive market where the margins are really low, and that means that economies of scale start to matter enormously because the difference, once your break-even cost is so high, just a little bit of difference, if you're a little bit above or a little bit below, that makes all the difference in the world, and that's the Volkswagen lesson. They're the only guys in Europe who managed to get to the right kind of scale where they could make a profit for their cars and have their costs at the right level, and it generates a virtuous cycle because now they're more profitable, so they can cut prices and still make profits and so on. But it's not just Peugeot. I mean, Fiat is in the same basket. It's not profitable. They closed down factories last year. They're in the same problem, and the only thing they're talking about at Fiat is scale, and that's why they invested in Chrysler, and they're saying, we need to buy somebody, but because if we don't get the right scale, we're not gonna be able to succeed. And Peugeot has that same problem because it's a small car manufacturer. It's a mostly French and European manufacturer, and so it's screwed.
Downturn's hit it right. Okay. All right. On that note, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have the international headlines for you, plus, of course, the second part of our debate. Don't go away.